Welcome to Constitutional Defenders, where we discuss important issues and cases related to criminal defense and how criminal defense attorneys handle these cases on a daily basis. Today, we'll be discussing race in the criminal justice system. We'll be speaking with Robert Burton-Harris, who was the attorney on a case where race was very much on display. That case is now widely known as the case where a man was doing nothing other than gardening while black. Welcome to Episode 3. Welcome back to Constitutional Defenders. Today we are here with, once again, Takura and Mary. Hello, guys.
Hey, Lizzy.
How you doing, Lizzy?
Good. Mary is still quarantined because she's still sick, so she's not allowed in the podcast room. So, Mary, who do we have today?
We are so thankful we have Robert Burton-Harris, who is a fantastic criminal defense lawyer from Michigan. I also am very lucky to know Robert's wife, Victoria Burton-Harris, also another amazing attorney from Michigan. They have the cutest child I think I've ever seen. And Robert, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Robert, one of the cases that we want to talk about today is a case that has really captured so many people around the nation. The New York Times did a story about it, and it's the case where you represented a man who essentially was charged with crimes because he was working in a garden in Detroit. Robert, can you tell us a little bit about the facts of the case and how you got involved?
Sure. So this was last year. I got a message on Facebook, I think, from one of the community activists that are around here in Detroit saying, hey, one of our activist friends has been arrested and we don't know what's going on. And, the usual kind of frantic calls person gets when somebody that they know is arrested. I get in contact with the potential client. He explains, what's going on. And essentially, he's been arrested because of 3 complaining witnesses in the area that he normally does his community activist work have been complaining over the course of almost 2 years that he's been threatening them and he's been saying he's going to burn their house down and just all of this crazy, violent stuff. And so you talk to clients and you try to get the story and,
right.
Sometimes you may not get the full true story.
Right.
We know how that goes, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, I'm trying to, keep an open mind, but I mean, this guy's adamant that he's done nothing of the sort, nothing that could be even, mistaken as some type of threatening behavior. So, I get the police reports and, he accepts my representation. So after I get, the information from the client, I start my own investigation because, of course, this is Detroit and Detroit. The police department can't investigate their way out of a paper bag. So I do my own research and I talk to the folks in the neighborhood. I agree with that. It's not just Detroit, but Detroit is just it's a special place. I mean, they do things and they will admit that, sometimes their investigation is terrible, but they'll proceed anyway. But regardless, I do my own investigation, and it really doesn't seem to be any evidence to support these allegations. What the client was charged with, he was charged with 3 counts of stalking. And like I said, the complaining witnesses had been saying over the course of several months that he had been threatening them and, they just called 911 basically whenever he was in the neighborhood.
So, Robert,
I'm
sorry. Pardon the interruption, but this may seem like an obvious question, but the client was black?
Yes, the client was black.
How about the complaining witnesses?
The 3 complaining witnesses were white.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that, of course, added another dynamic to it. I'm a black man. I've lived in Detroit all my life. So I've lived and was raised by the Grosse Pointe border. So I'm no stranger to that type of dynamic and those type of interactions where white people may feel threatened or feel that you're some type of danger just by being around. So that was that also kind of struck a chord with me. But ultimately, the client was charged with 3 counts of stalking, one for each complaining witness, and we had to basically go to trial because the prosecutor's office, for whatever reason, didn't believe all of the evidence and things that I presented to them to try to make this case go away, because of course my client just threw his life into an upheaval basically.
So Robert, I want to interrupt for a minute. You did your own investigation, like the amazing defense lawyer that you are, and you presented it to the prosecutor to say, because truthfully, a lot of times we hold things back to surprise the government at trial or to impeach a witness. Mm-hmm. In this case, though, and we've done this sometimes too, where you try and hope the prosecutor will come to their senses, you actually presented what you found to them, and it didn't persuade them at all, it sounds like.
I was 100% transparent from the very beginning. That this was, a case of, this, I deemed it the gardening while black case because these women were repeatedly calling the police on my client because he actually doesn't live in that neighborhood. He was born and raised over there. But he had a community garden over there. So that was the main and the biggest reason why he was over there. He also did like a couple backpack giveaways for the area kids. Oh, wow. But that was the reason why he was over there. So I kind of, said this was basically, they were calling on him because he was just a black guy and he was gardening. But I was very transparent with the prosecutors, let them know what was going on, let them hear the recordings of their officers who were responding to these calls saying that this was bullshit. Oh, wow. And this was just, something that shouldn't be pursued, and why are we out here? I mean, all of this. And of course, they don't say it to my client while they're, basically asking him what he's doing in the neighborhood as he's sitting there raking the leaves and, boarding up abandoned houses in the area.
So your
but
client
when they got back in the squad car.
So your client is trying to make the area a better place, and he's getting accused of stalking by these 3 white women.
And
not even trying, but actually making the neighborhood better.
Yeah, like doing good deeds, and this is how he gets, thanked for that.
Wow.
Right.
So it's my understanding he took essentially a vacant property and was turning it into a community garden because he has a long history in his family of sort of farming and gardening, and that's sort of in his DNA a little bit. And he also is concerned about the community and wants to make it a better place. Is that accurate?
Essentially, but the gardening, he actually got permission from the city to do exactly what he was doing. So the gardening was actually located in a public park, and so he went through the process of getting the permission from the city to do his gardening work there. It was the houses that are around there that he would sometimes board up if they were falling, if they were open and dangerous. He would board them up, and he was a lot of times when the police were called, he was over at these houses cleaning up. So like mowing the lawns of the abandoned houses, raking leaves, weeding, just trying to make the area, as decent looking as possible.
Jeez.
What prompted these women to start calling the police on him?
Well, I can't say definitively because we got so many different reasons and responses during trial. I think that one of the main kind of the leader of this, charge to get this, dangerous gardener out of the neighborhood. She liked the wild aspect of the park. She moved over there a couple years before Mr. Peoples, the client's name, Mr. Peoples, came over there and was, improving the area. And she actually had posted a lot of Facebook videos saying how much she liked the area because it was so undisturbed, because it was so wild and just, kind of untamed. So when he went over there and was, basically improving the area, trying to make things look a little bit manicured, I think that was kind of the first point of contention between these folks.
That's so crazy.
Wow. So I'm curious. Oh, go ahead, Mary.
No, you go ahead, T.
I was just gonna ask about voir dire, the jury selection process, because I think that's one of the most critical stages of the case. Can you talk a little bit about how that discussion was, and for example, did they find it hard? I know you can't go too much into the facts. Most judges will cut you off. But what sort of questions did you ask, and what kind of discussion did you have with your potential jurors?
Well, the judge did a lot of the voir dire. This was in the 36th District Court, so that we didn't have the chance really to ask a whole bunch of questions. One of the questions I wanted to know was just basically, who had basically been accused of, something that they either hadn't done, or who had been involved in a situation where somebody else had misstated or misrepresented a situation that they were a part of. So, but like I said, I mean, the voir dire was actually really, really limited.
Oh, wow.
The accusations, you talked about stalking. Were there other accusations? Didn't they say at one point he had a gun, which he never had, and then he had some sort of like sexual assault conviction, which he did not have?
Sure. So that came later, just because they weren't getting anywhere by calling the police, because when the police would come out there, they would, give my client a little bit of a hard time, but, for the pretty much they couldn't do anything. They couldn't arrest him, like I said, just for raking leaves and not doing anything. So as time went on, and, the police kept getting called and he wasn't being arrested, then that's when the accusations became progressively more serious. So that's where you got he's out there with the gun. He's actually a pedophile on the sex registry, and he shouldn't be around kids, and he has kids out there. Cause the time that he actually was arrested, he was with a group of homeschool kids, just showing them about gardening. And one of the complaining witnesses called the police and said that he was a registered sex offender and shouldn't be around children.
Oh my God!
That was the time that he was actually picked up.
How traumatizing for those children! I mean,
exactly.
But to be
exactly.
clear, he's not a registered sex offender at all. I mean,
absolutely not. There was
right.
There was absolutely no truth to that whatsoever.
So the women were literally just throwing out lies to see which one would stick and he could get arrested for. That's crazy.
Yep. As he was not getting right, and he wasn't arrested that time. So that's why it was just progressively more and more serious accusations, just to the point where he could be arrested.
What was that like for your client to be? Really, he's the one who's being constantly harassed and have these falsehoods thrown at him while this was going on. And did he share how he felt about that with you?
Oh, it was horrifying. It was horrifying. It was terrible. I mean, he has these people. The arrest was, some of the parents were out there with these children. So the arrest was on social media, and he's, trying to explain himself to a police officer, saying that he's not some sex offender and all that. So it's just humiliating. I mean, and part of the reason why we kind of approached it with, being pretty transparent and forthcoming with what we had found as far as evidence goes, was because he didn't want to go through this process. This is not a situation where you have some, rich client who just doesn't really care about him. I mean, this really tore up his entire life. I mean, he had some contracts to do some more type of community-based work that he lost as a result of the accusations. Initially, part of his bond conditions was that he was not to return to the area. So basically, they did whatever they wanted to his garden. He lost his tools that he had stored over there. So it was just a complete nightmare until it was, ultimately resolved in his favor.
Now, in an unusual move, I think it was the judge who tossed the case. Is that right?
It was acquittal by directed verdict.
Wow. Tell us about, they put the women had testified?
Yes, all three complainants testified.
And then tell us about the arguments you made to the judge in order to convince the judge to issue that directed verdict. That is, for listeners, so rare. I mean, I think I could count the number of times on one hand and still have a bunch of fingers left over. Right. What that means is essentially a judge is telling the defense, you don't even have to put your case on. The government's case is so weak, we're not going to send it to the jury. So tell us what you argued to the judge.
So the argument is kind of, of course they derive from the testimony, but by the time we got to the point where, you make the motion for the directed verdict, I mean, it was 100% clear that these women had been just lying their asses off. And not only that, but, took an exception to just like my client's political views, and just had just this idea that this was their area and they could, just do whatever they want. So one line of questioning that, came out was this idea of, him being a pedophile and where that information came from. I mean, this woman is on the stand saying that, she got this from a principal that she called. It's like, well, what principal? What are you talking about? Or it was some principal that I called and he told me that he was a pedophile. She couldn't tell me what school this was from, what principal she called. She couldn't say why or where she got this information. So it was just like, okay, you're obviously making this up. And of course, like I told you before, these kids were homeschooled. So it's just no basis to be believing that, some principal, has called, she's contacted and spoke with, a principal. It was interesting because when we first started, the prosecutor didn't do an opening. So she didn't do an opening.
Yeah, I've never seen that. She didn't
do an opening, and the judge, made us both, made us approach, and she's like, what is going on here? And I'm like, I've been telling y'all about this case for the last 2 months. I mean, this is, you're about to see what's, going on. And they put the first witness on, and the first witness can't answer the question as to why she's here. Like, she can't articulate what exactly my client had done that was wrong to her. So the judge takes us back in chambers, and she's like, tell me what the hell is going on with this case. Like, why are we here? You didn't even do an opening, which I think is grounds for dismissal. This is what she told, the prosecutor. Mm-hmm. But what is going on in this case, and why are we here? And unfortunately, the prosecutor really couldn't say anything other than, I'm here because my supervisor wouldn't let me dismiss the case.
Wow. Such a waste of taxpayer money and time. That is just absolutely ridiculous. People should be furious about that.
It was. It was absolutely startling.
So what was
so startling? So startling that shortly after this, the prosecutor in that case quit.
Oh wow! Jinx.
Right.
It's good, right? Good.
Good. You're right.
Right. I mean, it seems like the prosecutor knew the case was lousy and was being forced to go forward. From the reaction that the jury had as the testimony was coming out, it sounds like the judge knew the same thing. Did it seem like the jury knew that this was a case that was just baloney?
Oh, absolutely. She gave the directed verdict. I want to say like around 4:15. The court closes around 4:30. So she goes and talks to the jurors and, dismisses them. And they told her that they were going to be back there for 10 minutes and they were going to acquit them.
Good.
So,
yeah.
That's awesome.
So how many times did these women call the cops on your client?
From my evidence and from the police reports, not including the personal protection order that one tried to get against them that, failed. I would say maybe no less than 7 times.
That's so crazy that the cops just keep going out there,
right?
And still have the focus on your client rather than these women who clearly are just escalating and making up lies about him.
And I think I read in the article
part of the problem. I'm sorry. Part of the problem was that as they weren't getting, the complaining witnesses weren't getting the response and result that they wanted. They just kept hounding the police. So one of the last things they did before the warrant got issued was they actually went up to their local precinct and, surprisingly was able to meet with like the second in command of DPD and some other commanders at that time. Wow. And, basically like they got a lot of attention that I've not seen, from other people making even more serious allegations on people.
What was it like when the judge came out? So the judge came out and dismissed the case. Did she go back or was she on the bench and then she dismissed the case? What was that like for you and your client?
She went back to, I'm assuming to just collect her thoughts and to jot it down because she did make a pretty thorough, honest record about what she felt about the case and what she felt about the 3 complaining witnesses. So it was just, he was happy with the way the women had testified. We were still, considering, okay, well, if she doesn't, give us a directed verdict, do you want to testify or not? So that was what his mind, I think, what he was focused on trying to figure out if it was even necessary for him to testify at that point.
Did you sleep pretty well that night, knowing that your client had been vindicated?
Like a baby.
I'm sure
awesome.
You did.
And I think I read that ultimately he set up a GoFundMe page and over $53,000 was raised.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I think it's actually, the last time I looked, I want to say it was like 64 or 65.
Yeah.
That's great.
Good.
No, the judge was pretty open in an interview that was given where the judge said that I believe race was a motivating factor and an injustice has been done to this man.
Mm-hmm.
And that seems pretty evident from what you have articulated. And this is not, and this is a question I think I know the answer to, right? This is not the only case in the criminal justice system where you see race being that motivating factor, correct?
Right, of course not.
Right,
course
and
not. Especially in Detroit.
Mm-hmm.
Right. There was a Washington Post article and then a follow-up in the last year, and author of the article listed literally dozens and dozens of studies that had been done about the overwhelming evidence of how the criminal justice system is disproportionately unfair when we're dealing with people of color, Black people, Hispanics. And it's really fascinating that a Justice Department study indicated that Black and Latino drivers are more likely to be searched once they have been pulled over, and about 2% of white motorists were searched versus 6% for Black drivers and 7% for Latinos, and it just goes on and on and on. And I mean, I think I see this every day in my cases, and for my fellow defense lawyers on this podcast, what do you guys think?
Oh, absolutely.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt.
Oh yeah.
No question.
I mean,
no question.
it's extremely clear that in the case of your client, it was 3 racist white women who did not want a Black man in their community. I mean, it's absolutely clear.
You know, one aspect
Right.
that I found offensive about the case is that they claimed he was painting gang colors, the Pan-African colors. You know, I'm from Zimbabwe. That's where I was born and raised.
Mm-hmm.
And those are 3 colors in our flag. So for someone to claim,
Yeah, I'm sorry I cut you off. Go ahead.
No. Just the statement that when they claimed that he was painting gang colors on vacant houses and trees, when again those are the Pan-African colors. It put the wind in my sails when he said, "Look, if I leave this park, then it's a victory for you people. I'm gonna stay there and garden and paint as much red, black, and green as I can all over the park." So
apparently, those women did not pay attention in geography class.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, no, that was another aspect of it that I was actually I had a lot of admiration for him, because that was before the trial went on. The complaining witnesses had spoke to the prosecutor, and they were basically willing to drop the charge. Well, of course, the witnesses don't drop the charges, but they were willing to say that they didn't want any charges so long as he agreed not to come back to the park. And he said no. And this is, of course, before trial, so he doesn't know what's going to happen. This is, something that could, be a permanent mark, against him.
Right.
Good for him.
But he was willing to press on ahead because he knew, he felt that he was right.
Good for him, because as Mary and Takura know, we see a lot of clients who are likely very, very innocent and are just being accused of something terrible, but yet they will, take a deal because they don't want to go through this process anymore. It's too expensive. It's too stressful. They just want it to be done. So good for him to,
That's
push
right.
through and, show how really innocent he is.
Yeah.
Was there community support for him during the trial? Did people come to the trial to, lend that support?
Yes, that there was. The courtroom wasn't packed, but it was definitely a lot of community support behind them, and even the people that didn't come there, he had overwhelming support from all over the nation, and I got some letters from folks overseas that were just sending him well wishes.
Oh, wow.
And
Awesome.
saying that they were upset, hearing about this, and professional gardeners or people that do that type of thing were offering to volunteer and help them with the
Awesome.
garden, in the future. So I mean, it really kind of became this really, really beautiful story of people coming together. But of course, we know that 99% of the time, that's just, even if you get an acquittal, the story isn't that great at the
Right.
end.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just crazy because I feel like a lot of people, especially with the political atmosphere we have right now, try to make it seem like there isn't as much racism going on today. It's 2019. It's not happening. It's not like it's 1950,
Right.
1960s. But I mean, this is clear. This happens all over the place. I mean, this man was just trying to make this neighborhood a better place and was succeeding at it and was taken down by three racist white women. I mean, it
Yeah.
happens every day,
And
unfortunately.
I'll say this. Um, I was I'm on several boards, right? But a couple of years ago, uh, I was riding a bicycle and helping mark the course
That's right.
for a 5K fundraiser,
Mhm.
and I don't know who it was, but somebody called the police, and the police officer, he actually, when he walked up to me, was apologetic and said, "Oh my goodness, this is so awkward for me." And then he explained that somebody had called, and I'm I'm fortunate
Mm-hmm.
that it ended the way it did. We chuckled and went on about my business.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I shared with my, fellow board members what had happened, they were more upset. And I said, look, this is nothing new.
Mm-hmm.
It's not unusual. Um, and
Right.
I guess it's sad that we've become so desensitized and that this is run of the mill for some folks.
Yeah, that's just
But
normal
but
now.
I'm
Yeah, I can
fortunate,
I
yeah.
could regale you with stories of similar type of instances where
Yeah.
I'm thinking I'm trying to do something right, or just doing something very innocent, and now I got to deal with the police.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm sure you get that a lot in Detroit too.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
We're all over. Takura, you talked about being the only black face in a white courthouse,
Oh
and
yeah.
we've had clients who, they're African American and they have an all Caucasian jury, and
Right.
they're looking at us and saying, "Is this a jury of my peers?" And
Absolutely
you have
not.
to say, "Right, it's not." But this is right now the best the system is offering you.
We had a case where we had Takura and I were just talking about this the other day. I think we had a jury pool of 300 in the Western District, and there were two
That's right.
people who were not white in that pool of 300, with us having a
Hmm.
young African American client. It was just insane. I never would have
Oh
thought that would
wow.
have happened.
So what do you do with that? I mean, how do you approach that? Do you just not even mention race just because it's too of a complicated
Oh no, you got to.
issue, or what exactly do you do with it?
Absolutely do. You
We
can't shy
mentioned
away from it. Yeah.
No, you have to mention race. You have to.
Okay.
You have to bring, I mean, all of this, I think you have to bring out into the open. It's interesting. I just watched a video recently. It's, I believe, the United States District Court in Washington has approximately a 10-minute video in their federal courts that they're showing on implicit bias. And it's two lawyers and a judge who talk about how we all have an implicit bias, and by being aware of it, we're more likely to think about it when we're doing things like jury duty. And it was actually really good. And I think even in addition to, overt issues of race, we all have that implicit bias. I mean, we do, right? If a, 75-year-old lady comes ringing your doorbell, you're likely to have a very different reaction than if a 15-year-old teenage boy rings your doorbell,
Mm-hmm.
just because you
Right.
think, well, that little old lady is going to be, likely to be safer. And it was a really interesting video, and something that I'm wondering if Michigan will ultimately adopt in their jury selection process. But Takura, you talked about you do address it, and I know you do because we're
Oh yes.
business partners and we've got cases together. But I mean, you address it openly, right? I mean, you don't dance around it.
No, no, not at all. Not at all. The short answer is no. You've got to take the bull by the horns.
And I feel
Absolutely.
like if it makes jurors uncomfortable, you want it to make them uncomfortable because they shouldn't be comfortable with the thought that someone could be on the jury who, is totally racist and against your client just because of the color of their skin. So I feel like that uncomfortableness kind of has to happen.
And I mean,
Great.
frankly,
That's good tips from the masters. Thank you.
but I mean, frankly, because we're not dealing with pet adoptions, I know, everyone in our office loves animals, but we are dealing with heavy duty matters. Nobody who comes and sees us is coming there for the sport of it, right? So I think
Right.
we do them a disservice if we are reticent to address something where their freedom is literally in the balance. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
Right. I've had stealth jurors, I know we all have, who don't freely admit what is going on in their head. Sometimes you can pick it up with body language. Their arms are crossed and they're telling you how
Right.
open-minded they can be. But I've been amazed at how open jurors are about their viewpoints on race, about when we've had a client who is a lesbian or gay, they've been very open about their feelings about that. It is shocking to me. You can't say, what are you thinking, when you really want to. But I've been really amazed with people who live these very sheltered lives or have just these deeply ingrained prejudices and who are very open about it. In some ways, I'm thankful that they are very open about it
That's
because,
right.
off the jury they go. But it makes me worry about, folks going back into their community and living with these really, just these prejudices that they truly believe are true, and they're not at all.
We had a couple clients that we represented where our client was Muslim, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Mary, but I believe one juror actually said, "You don't want me on this jury because I don't like." I don't think he said he hates Muslims, but it was pretty close because he was pretty aggressive. Yeah. So I mean, it was just very open about how he would absolutely try and take them down just because they're Muslim. It was insane to hear.
Oh wow.
100%.
Now, what did you have to use a preemptory, or was he just go ahead and the judge dismissed him?
The judge dismissed him for cause.
Okay,
I think
good.
that anti-Muslim sentiment people seem to be very comfortable espousing that. We've had a number of Muslim clients, and people seem to be far more comfortable espousing that than really almost any other racist view. It's been amazing. I think that anti-Muslim sentiment, people feel more open about expressing almost more than anything else, especially now in these times. And that is, again, another very concerning area for us in our country, I think. So you took this case and you fought passionately for your client as you do for all your clients. Where does that sense of justice come from in you?
I've been thinking about this a lot lately. I've actually taken a position with the new defender's office in Wayne County. And so that was one of the things that we've been kind of thinking about. And I think it boils down to, two things. One, I just really like being able to tell the government no. And the second thing would just be, I think I just have a real disdain for bullies. It's like, why and especially when the bullies, their attention is on somebody who really can't defend themselves. So it's like, out of all of the people that you're gonna, wrap up in this criminal no justice system that we have, like, it's the black gardener. That's really who you want to go after.
For real.
So I think that, I think that really kind of motivates me.
Well, keep telling the government no.
That's right.
I will absolutely try.
I love standing up to the government, and I love the fact that you're joining the defender's office there, or you have joined them, because so many people have this notion that, a defender's office, they're going to be overworked. And I love that you are able to change that notion, and people are going to get excellent representation even when they are indigent and couldn't afford it. I think it's so important in our communities. It's just so important to really keep the government honest. Takura and I have a really interesting case out of Detroit where this man has been convicted since 1994 of a murder that I would bet every single penny that any of us have that he didn't commit. And currently we're in the process of fighting to exonerate him. And when you look at what was occurring in Detroit in terms of really people being incentivized to say that someone committed a murder when there's no way possible that person could have committed the murder, which will be the subject of another podcast.
Oh, yeah.
That's right.
It is crazy. It's crazy how detrimental these sort of corrupt practices are to communities. I mean, lives have just
So
been
much
changed.
corruption.
And actually, it's
Oh my
scary because all it takes, literally, is for someone to point the finger, and no matter how many of the facts point away from the person who's had the finger pointed at them, unfortunately, there are law enforcement personnel who will just turn a blind eye, and if it doesn't support what they think is the right conclusion, then sorry about your luck.
Yep.
Right.
And when we talked about implicit bias, I think there's a big implicit bias that, well, if the government is bringing the case, the person must have done something wrong. If the police are saying this is the man, they must be right. That is a huge implicit bias going far beyond race or anything like that I think needs to be countered with jurors. And even the community, they see someone arrested in the paper and they think, oh, he must have done it. When the reality is the police get it wrong and prosecutors get it wrong. And we saw that in your case with Mr. Bowles. I mean, that prosecutor, it sounds like, did not want to prosecute that case. He didn't even make an opening statement.
Yeah.
And
she was pretty disgusted with it. Yeah, she was a black woman, and she was, she knew that this was just BS, and she just couldn't. She wasn't allowed to dismiss the charges.
Well, good for her for quitting and moving on to something different, and kind of realizing that she didn't want to be part of that. Good for her.
She's in defense work now.
Oh,
yeah!
I love that.
So we stole one from their side and we added one to ours.
Yes.
Awesome. It would have been great though if she had replaced her supervisor and then you have somebody in there with some common sense.
For real.
Right.
Robert, so you joined the defender's office. What's going on with Mr. Peoples now? What's his life like?
Last time we spoke, he was, doing well. He was able to buy his mom a house or pay the rest of her the money she owed on her house. He was able to, he was able to clear that debt for her, and he's doing well now. He's moved on. He's still at the garden. He's still doing that community-based work.
Good.
And he's he's just pushing forward.
Awesome.
Thank goodness it didn't deter him. Yeah.
So much, Robert. He owes you so much, and the community owes you so much for taking this case and fighting so hard for him.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I felt like it was, my duty. I mean, he's helping our community, and I can assist him in doing his work. And we all have a role to play, right? So that was just my role.
You are awesome, Robert. Thank you so much for joining us today. And
thank you so much for having me.
We wish you and Victoria and your family all the best, and keep fighting the good fight. And I feel so confident that you are going to continue to go and fight all these great cases in Detroit and beyond. And I look forward to hearing about all your successes and seeing you again soon.
You all as well. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. We're going to start releasing our episodes every 2 weeks now. We're starting to get into a very heavy trial season, so wish us all luck. Stay tuned for some really great upcoming episodes that we're all really excited about, and have a great one.